For years, fans of Alaska, the last frontier, followed Jane Kilcher as she built a life in the harsh wilderness. Strong, fearless, and deeply private, she rarely spoke about personal struggles. But recent updates revealed a painful truth many had quietly suspected. Behind the survival skills and quiet strength was a story filled with loss and difficult choices. What really happened in Jane's life, and why did she finally speak now? Stay with us to uncover everything. The story begins in Alaska, a vast land of snow, mountains, and silence. Near the town of Homer, a family lived far from modern life. They hunted. They fished. They survived using skills passed down for generations. This was the world of the Kilcher family. In 2011, the Discovery Channel introduced this life to millions through Alaska, the last frontier. The show followed the Kilchers as they lived off the grid, without many of the comforts people take for granted. There were no grocery stores nearby, no easy access to hospitals. Every day required effort, planning, and strength. Among the family members was Jane Kilcher. She did not grow up as a Kilcher, but she understood the land. Jane came from a fishing family in Alaska. From a young age, she learned how to read the water, how to catch fish, and how to respect nature. When she married into the Kilcher family, she brought those skills with her. Viewers quickly noticed her. She was calm, focused, often quiet. While others spoke openly about their lives, Jane stayed reserved. She did not explain much. She simply acted. On screen, she could be seen casting a line into icy waters, or preparing food after a long day, or standing silently, looking across the land. This made her different. Many reality TV personalities rely on words. They explain their feelings. They share their stories. Jane did not, and that created mystery. Fans began to ask questions. Who was she before the show? What shaped her strength? Why did she avoid talking about her past? But the show did not always answer those questions. Instead, it focused on survival. Episodes showed the Kilchers preparing for winter, fixing cabins, hunting for food, protecting livestock. These moments were real, but they were only part of the story. Behind the scenes, life was more complex. Filming took time, long hours, repeated scenes, harsh weather, the pressure to perform while staying authentic. Reality television often walks a fine line. It shows real life, but it also shapes it for viewers. According to industry reports, many reality shows avoid deeply personal topics unless cast members agree to share them. In Jane's case, she chose silence. That silence spoke louder than words. Over time, viewers began to notice small changes. Her expressions became more serious. Her interactions sometimes felt distant. There were moments where she seemed present physically, but far away emotionally. These were subtle signs, easy to miss at first. But for longtime viewers, something felt different. The strong, steady figure they admired still stood there. But behind her eyes, there seemed to be something unspoken, something heavy, something unresolved. And as seasons passed, the gap between what was shown and what was hidden seemed to grow wider. Still, Jane said very little. She continued to work, to fish, to survive. But the silence began to feel less like strength and more like protection. Because sometimes people stay quiet not because they have nothing to say, but because the truth is too difficult to speak. And as the cameras kept rolling, small changes in Jane's behavior began to raise questions no one could ignore. Behind the quiet strength, there was a past few people fully understood. Before joining the Kilcher family, Jane Kilcher had already lived through difficult moments. Her early life in Alaska was shaped by fishing, long days on the water, and a deep connection to nature. But it was also shaped by personal challenges that would later follow her into the public eye. One of the most sensitive parts of her story involved her first marriage. According to various reports and public discussions over the years, Jane had a daughter from that relationship. But the relationship ended, and custody of her daughter became a painful and complicated issue. It was not something she spoke about openly. In fact, for a long time, she chose not to speak about it at all. This silence created distance between what viewers saw on screen and what existed in reality. While audiences watched her thrive in the wilderness, few knew about the emotional weight she carried. Losing time with a child is not something that fades easily. It stays quiet, heavy, always present in the background. For Jane, this may have shaped the way she interacted with the world. Her reserved nature, her careful words, and her emotional distance were not random traits. They were part of a deeper story. Life in Alaska only made things more intense. Living off-grid means fewer distractions, fewer escapes. There are long winters, dark days, and long stretches of silence. For someone carrying emotional pain, that kind of environment can feel even heavier. At the same time, cameras were always there. Reality television does not pause for personal struggles. Filming schedules continue. Scenes must be completed. Life must go on, even when emotions are difficult to manage. Industry sources often point out that reality TV participants face a unique kind of pressure. They must live real lives while being constantly observed, but they also choose what to reveal. Jane chose to protect her past. However, that decision came with its own cost. As the show gained popularity, fans became more curious. Online forums and social media discussions began to focus on her silence. Some viewers noticed emotional distance. Others speculated about hidden struggles. The questions grew louder, but Jane remained quiet. For years, she kept that part of her life away from the cameras, away from interviews, away from public conversations. Yet, silence does not erase truth. It only delays it. Over time, the emotional weight of the past, combined with the pressure of public attention, began to build. Small moments on screen hinted at deeper feelings. A pause in conversation, a distant look, a quiet withdrawal. These moments did not go unnoticed. They created a sense that something important was missing from the story. And as more people began asking questions, the pressure to respond slowly increased. Because eventually, silence reaches a limit. And when that limit is reached, the truth has a way of finding its way out. However, the moment she could no longer stay silent was closer than anyone expected. For years, Jane Kilcher remained quiet. No clear statements, no detailed interviews, just brief comments and a steady presence on screen. But behind that silence, pressure was building. Fans were watching closely. By the mid to late 2010s, Alaska, the last frontier, had gained a loyal audience. Viewers were no longer just watching for survival stories. They were paying attention to the people, their emotions, their relationships, and they began to notice changes. Jane seemed more distant in certain moments. Conversations felt shorter. Her expressions sometimes carried a quiet sadness that was hard to explain. Online discussions grew. Many viewers started asking the same questions. Why did she avoid certain topics? Why did she seem guarded when family discussions became personal? What was she holding back? At first, these questions stayed in small groups. Fan forums, comment sections, quiet speculation. But over time, they spread. Social media gave those questions a louder voice. Clips from episodes were shared and analyzed. Small details were noticed. A look, a pause, a change in tone. Everything began to matter. For someone who had worked hard to keep her private life separate, this growing attention made things more difficult. Jane was no longer just living her life. She was being studied. And then something shifted. According to public interactions and statements shared over time, Jane began to respond, carefully but more openly than before. Not in one single moment, but in small pieces. A comment here, a clarification there. She did not tell everything, but she told enough. Enough for people to understand that the rumors were not entirely wrong. Enough to confirm that her past included real loss, real separation, real emotional pain. For many fans, this was the moment everything changed. The strong, silent figure they admired was still there. But now there was context, a deeper layer that explained her guarded nature. It was not weakness. It was protection. Speaking about such personal experiences is never easy, especially in front of a public audience. especially when those experiences involve family and deeply emotional decisions. Jane's choice to open up, even slightly, was significant. It showed a shift from silence to acknowledgement, from distance to honesty. But truth comes with consequences. Once something is revealed, it cannot be taken back. It invites more questions, more attention, more opinions. And that is exactly what happened. The reaction was immediate. Some fans offered support. They expressed understanding. They respected her strength even more. Others became more curious. They wanted details. They wanted explanations. They wanted the full story. The situation became more intense. Because now, the mystery was no longer hidden. It was out in the open, but incomplete. And incomplete truths often create even more questions. For Jane, this meant facing something new. Not just her past, but the public response to it. The moment she spoke did not close the chapter. It opened a new one. A chapter filled with reactions, pressure, and emotional consequences she could not fully control. Because sometimes, telling the truth does not bring peace right away. Sometimes, it changes everything in ways no one expects. But revealing the truth did not bring peace. It opened the door to even deeper consequences. Once the truth began to surface, the response was immediate. Viewers who had followed Jane Kilcher for years suddenly saw her in a different light. What once felt like mystery now had meaning. Her silence was no longer confusing. It was understandable. But not everyone reacted the same way. Some fans showed support. They shared messages online expressing respect for her strength. Many said they admired her even more for facing such personal pain while continuing to live a demanding life in Alaska. Others wanted more answers. They questioned why the full story had not been shared earlier. They revisited old episodes, searching for clues. Every scene began to feel different, as if it held hidden meaning. The attention grew quickly. Reality television often brings public interest, but when personal truths are revealed, that interest can turn into pressure. For Jane, this meant facing not just her past, but the opinions of thousands of viewers. At the same time, there was the family. The Kilchers did not live like most families. They shared land. They worked together daily. They depended on each other to survive harsh conditions. In such an environment, emotional tension cannot be easily avoided. Every conversation matters. Every silence is noticed. When something personal becomes public, it can affect trust. It can change how people see each other. Even small misunderstandings can grow when there is no space to step away. Reports and observations from the show suggested that relationships became more careful. Conversations sometimes felt more controlled, as if everyone was aware that anything could be seen, discussed, or judged by an audience. This created a new kind of pressure. Not just survival in the wilderness, but survival under constant observation. For Jane, this balance became more difficult. She had taken a step toward honesty, but now she had to live with the result of that honesty every day. There were likely moments of regret, moments of relief, moments of uncertainty. Because telling the truth does not always solve problems. Sometimes it simply brings them into the open. And once they are visible, they must be faced fully. Family dynamics are fragile, especially when they are shared with the world. One emotional moment can echo far beyond the home. Yet life in Alaska does not stop. The seasons continue. Winter comes. Work must be done. Food must be prepared. Animals must be cared for. There is no pause for personal struggles. This reality forced everyone to keep moving forward, even while processing the emotional impact of what had been revealed. For viewers, the story became more than entertainment. It became real. A reminder that behind every strong image on screen, there is a human story filled with challenges that are not always visible. For Jane, the journey was no longer about keeping things hidden. It was about learning how to live with the truth, publicly and privately at the same time. And as the dust began to settle, one question remained. What would Jane's future look like after everything changed? Life did not stop after the truth came out. In Alaska, it never does. The land remained the same. Cold, demanding, unforgiving. Each day still required effort, focus, and strength. For Jane Kilcher, the routine of survival continued, even as her personal life had changed in a very public way. There was no clear reset, no moment where everything suddenly felt easier. Instead, there was a slow process, a quiet adjustment to a new reality where her story was no longer hidden. Viewers began to see a different side of her, not completely open, not fully expressive, but slightly more visible. Small changes appeared over time. Her words carried more meaning. Her silence felt less like distance and more like reflection. This shift was not dramatic. It was gradual, careful, controlled. Jane did not transform into someone new. She remained grounded in who she had always been. Strong, capable, focused on the work in front of her. But there was a difference. Acknowledging the past seemed to change how she carried it. For years, silence had acted as a shield. Now, even a small level of openness created space for something else: acceptance. According to observers and longtime viewers, her presence on screen began to feel more balanced. There was still strength, but also a quiet sense of vulnerability. And that made her story more real than ever. Because resilience is not just about enduring hardship. It is also about facing it. In many ways, Jane's journey reflects a larger truth about human experience. People carry hidden struggles. They build lives. They move forward. But eventually, those hidden parts ask to be acknowledged. For Jane, that moment came under public attention. Not everyone faces their past in front of millions of viewers. That alone makes her story different. Life within the Kilcher family also continued to evolve. Relationships adjusted. Conversations likely became more open, but also more careful. Trust is not rebuilt overnight. It grows slowly through time and shared experience. The environment around them did not allow for avoidance. They still worked together, still depended on each other, still faced the same challenges of nature and survival. And in that shared effort, something important remained: connection. Even when things are difficult, shared purpose can bring people back together. For viewers, the story no longer felt like just a survival show. It became something deeper. A story about truth, struggle, and the cost of silence. Jane Kilcher's journey did not end with her revelation. In many ways, that was just the beginning. A new phase. One where the past is no longer hidden, but also not fully resolved. Because healing is not a single moment. It is a process. Slow, uneven, ongoing. And while the cameras may continue to capture daily life, some parts of that journey will always remain personal, unseen, unspoken, but still deeply felt. Because sometimes the hardest battles are not fought in the wilderness, but within. Jane Kilcher's story is not just about survival in Alaska, but survival through life's hardest truths. If this story moved you, consider subscribing for more real-life journeys that reveal the human side behind the headlines.